few orbits in, we're dealt pocket aces, we're under the gun and open to 30. The middle position player recently stumbled across a magic lamp and was given 3 wishes. I suspect that he used one of them wishing for maximum pain because he makes the call and is in for all kinds of trouble. We're heads up out of position. That's not a concern though. The flop comes ace 8-8 with 2 hearts. We've got a full house of the highest kind. My hand is a little too good at the moment. I check. The opponent checks back immediately. Not a good sign. He probably doesn't have much. The turn is the queen of spades. There are 2 spades on the board now. We need to at least attempt to start getting value. I bet 40 to pump this pot up. Not too much time goes by before the opponent assembles chips and calls. If the dealer wanted to save some time, she could have just slid those chips right over towards me. We're more of a lock to win this than Boogie Cousins one-on-one against Brittany Griner. The river's the 3 of diamonds. I was hoping it'd be a spade because I wanted my opponent to catch a flush if he was on a draw. With every draw missing, it'll be tough for a bet of mine to get called. I don't mind checking to induce a bluff from something like 10-9 of spades or king 10. The fact that the player immediately checked back flop makes me think that he'd probably check back here too though. We can't have that happen. I get greedy and go for the home run betting 160. We see the opponent doing the wave with his fingers. That's some pretty impressive stuff. He's thinking about calling. Maybe he's got a queen and doesn't want to let me steal the pot from him if I have a misdraw myself. Ultimately, he lets his cards go. If I'd bet smaller, I likely would have gotten a call to win more money. I just need to make sure that I'm using large sizings as bluffs as well to be balanced so that no one can exploit me by always folding. Like pocket queens. I'm in middle position. I open to 60. The player with a much larger than average size stack 3 bets to 200. This is a spot in which I could go either way between 4 betting or flatting. In a game that plays a bit looser, I lean towards 4 betting. Here I flat. We're heads up, out of position. I'm down and not loving the spot. Not to worry though, the flop is queen 10-10. We have a full house and a 3-bet pot. I check to set the trap. I've had about 15 Diet Cokes to help me focus, so I'm trying to keep it all in, but it's tough with how excited I am right now. The hijack down bets to 140. I don't want to scare him off. I call. The turn is the 9 of spades. We still have the second best possible hand. I check again. The opponent increases the sizing to 360. I have about 3,000 total in my stack. What I'm trying to figure out is how I can get all the money in the middle. I put in a small raise to 1,000. Maybe we can get it all in on this street. The opponent calls. The pot will be set up nicely for me to jam river for slightly less than 2,000. Jeff folds and gives me the nice hand pat on the table. I later tell him that I flopped a boat. He'd let me know that he had ace jack of diamonds. We win a nice pot, but we're still stuck. Next we're dealt pocket sixes in the small blind. The hijack limps in. The button calls. We've got a hand with a lot of potential. I prefer to see a flop cheaply from this position rather than raise, likely get called in 2 spots, and have to play a much larger pot from out of position when we won't improve most of the time. I call for 2 more. The big blind checks his option. We're going 4 ways to the flop. We don't make a set. The dealer puts out Jack 6 with 2 clubs. We've got a full house and a multi-way pot. On second thought, maybe we should have bet pre-flop after all. It hasn't even been 45 minutes and we've already been involved in several interesting hands. He checks to the button. He's a sport. He does his best impression of an iceberg by running into a boat with a bet of 15 into a pot of 12. We want to keep all his bluffs in. I slow play with the call just like I know my girl Rose would. We can't let everyone know just yet that we've got the goods. The big blind and the hijack fold. It's heads up. The turn is the 4 of spades. It's a blank unless the button is playing the Robbie, which wouldn't be all that surprising. I check. The button falls right into our trap. He fires for 30. This is the point where we'll make our move. I slide in a raise to 110. Trip jack certainly won't be folding. The opponent may even call with a flush draw, even though I wouldn't advise doing that on a paired board because in instances like this, flush draws are drawing dead. The button takes his time, then eventually makes the call. This turned into a large pot. I'm rooting for a low club. The river is the 5 of spades. We've got 388 left in our stack. The opponent has us covered by $1 million after making quad jiggities against us earlier that we need to repay him for, and by that, I mean get him to pay us. I don't mind checking in this situation because a hand like trip jacks may still value bet, and hands like miss clubs won't be able to call it bet, but they may fire as a bluff. It seems unlikely that miss clubs will fire after I called more than a pot-sized bet on the flop and check raise turn, so I rip it in to target trip jacks. The opponent doesn't immediately lay his hand down. He may be thinking about calling. I get my stack out there bit by bit. After 15 seconds, the button folds. I didn't get the sense that he had a very tough decision. He almost certainly didn't have trips. I let the table see that we flopped a boat. I've never been very worried about showing people my hands at the table. Otherwise, I never would have started the YouTube channel. Shortly into the FT, we pick up pocket sixes in middle position. Blinds are 3K, 5K with a 5K big blind ante. I raise to 12K. The Cutoff, button, and small blind all call. This is a big 4-way pot. It's important for us to win since we're in the middle of the pack right now and haven't made any huge pay jumps yet. I'm going to need you to hit the like button on the count of 3 for extra run good. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The flop comes 9-9-6 with 2 clubs. We've got a full house and a multi-way pot at the end of a big tournament. The small blind checks. I don't want to scare anyone off, and we should have every other opponent in terrible shape or perhaps drawing dead. I want to keep all the draws in. I make a small bet of 15,000. The cutoff calls, the button calls, then the small blind jams for 108,000 total. He probably has a 9 or a strong draw of some sort. This is a dream situation. We've got 197,000 total. There's not much need for slow playing anymore. I rip it in, and the opponent behind doesn't immediately fold. There aren't too many hands that I'd play this way, basically just pocket sixes. It could appear like I just have a draw myself, and after betting small, perhaps I'm trying to isolate the shorter stack who's all in. After an extended period of time, the cutoff and button both fold. We show that we've got the boat. The small blind reveals that he flop trips with 9-7 of spades. This is the biggest pot that I've played all day. I can feel the adrenaline and nerves throughout my whole body.
7-9, pocket sixes.
The turn is the 8 of diamonds. It's scary because it's close in denomination to a 9 or 7, so for a second, I'm worried that we just got boat over boated. In reality, the only thing that happened is the opponent picked up a straight draw that won't be good anyway. The river is the 5 of spades, giving the small blind a straight, but we take down a huge pot at a significant time in the event.
There we go. Thank you.
We can breathe again after doing our best impression of Mike Tyson to knock out our opponent. As dinner time approaches, we play another bomb pot with pocket sixes under the gun. One player left the table, so we're 5-handed. The flop comes King-King-6 with 2 clubs. We flop a full house. It's the first time since the Jacksonville meetup game several sessions ago that I've started with a pocket pair and improved to a set or better on the flop. It comes at a great time. The small blind and big blind check. We need to punish anyone holding a king and charge flush draws, even though draws will already be dead to run a runner. I bet 275 for value. We don't want to slow play bottom full house because anyone holding a king will have outs against us, and because it's a bomb pot, we have no hint as to what anyone's kicker might be. If this were a normal hand in a single raise pot, for example, I wouldn't want to see additional high cards come out on the turn or river that connect with the king, like queens, jacks, or tens, because those would be obvious cards that might give an opponent a full house, since people often play Broadway cards containing a king. With ranges being completely uncapped in bomb pots, a seemingly harmless deuce on the turn might give someone a boat, cause me to lose my whole stack. Let's hope that doesn't happen. The cutoff folds, the button has some kind of piece, he calls, he could have trip kings, a medium pocket pair, a flush draw, or just ace high if he doesn't believe me. Small blind folds, the big blind isn't afraid even after seeing our bet and then a call from a different opponent. The big blind calls to close the action, which is really alarming. One of these guys could already have a full house or quads. You may remember that the last time I played these stakes, I flopped quads in a bomb pot and slow played it to stack someone in a massive 5-figure pot. 3 of us are still in. The turn is the 8 of spades. Is that a safe card for us? There's no way to know for sure. What I can be reasonably certain of is that one of these opponents likely has at least trips and potentially something better. The big blind checks. I go an unconventional route and I check to see what the button wants to do. I don't really mind giving flush draws a free card, and if the button has trips, he can bet for value or potentially as a bluff. When the action comes back to me, I can either call or check raise. If the button bets and the big blind raises, I might even consider folding to avoid getting stacked when we don't have much invested in the pot and could be dead. The button's okay taking a free card, he checks back, so maybe he doesn't have all that strong of a hand, perhaps just a medium pocket pair or a flush draw. The river's the 7 of spades. It's another card that may or may not be safe for us. We're additionally losing the king 7 and pocket 7s. The big blind bets 700. This is another similar situation to the bomb pot that we played with him earlier when he bet 800 on the turn, and I sensed that he wasn't that strong. I'm having the same thoughts right now. Part of me is considering calling to allow the button to call behind. I'm worried that if I raise, it'll scare the button off a hand that has value, and then the big blind will fold after already naming his price. Plus, there's still some chance that the button or big blind could have us beat, and then we light extra money on fire by raising. Given my history of raising the big blind and the fact that we played a boat passively on the turn, I raised a 2,000. The button isn't quick to make any sort of decision. If he shoves or re-raises to a smaller amount, I might throw up. The button folds, which temporarily alleviates some anxiety. Our line should appear to be pretty bluffy since we checked turn, but are all of a sudden strong enough to raise when a 7 shows up. The big blind's thinking long and hard about this one, just like he did when he correctly called our $4,000 shove previously. A call in this situation would be amazing, but I don't necessarily want to see him rip it in for several thousand more if he's been slow playing a monster this entire time. After a minute, the big blind folds. We've been running so well today, and this is a friendly group. I have to show the flopped full house. It's another big one that comes towards us to give us a clean sweep and large pots played. I've never sat in a high stakes game and ran this well from start to finish. I've been in poker long enough to know when I'm running good and to appreciate those sessions. This is definitely one of them. I lose a couple before I'm dealt pocket 10s in the small blind. The under the gun player straddled for 40. The hijack opens to 120. He's a very good player who's frequently in some of the highest stakes games in the world, including some in Macau. I call for 110 more. The big blind calls. The under the gun straddler also calls. We're going 4 ways to the flop out of position. There's already $500 in the middle. If you want to see me flop a set, hit the like button on the count of 3 for some extra run good. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The dealer puts out ace 10 with 2 spades. So many of you hit the like button that we've surpassed the set run good and we've actually made it into full house territory. I check for deception. The big blind and under the gun straddler check. The hijack makes a small bet of 180. I really don't have much to worry about except potentially getting boat over boated. That's rare and that'd be disgusting if that happened. I don't have to be worried about flushes or straights getting there. I want to keep those draws in if any of my opponents have one. I call. The big blind folds. Under the gun has something that you want to stick around with. He calls. It's down to 3 of us. The turn is the jack of spades. It's an interesting card. I'm losing to a royal flush, quad aces, ace jack, ace 10, and pocket jacks. Sounds like a lot of hands, but there really aren't that many combos of those. What's better is that the flush draws got there, and so did a straight draw. I check. Under the gun checks. The hijack thinks about firing, but he reins it in, and he also checks. I don't think that he's ever going to have me beat. The under the gun straddler was getting a good price pre-flop. He could have a variety of relatively strong but worse hands than mine. The river is the 3 of diamonds. It's a complete blank. The under the gun player has 1380 left in his stack. I mostly want to target his chips since the hijack may not have much that he can call a bet with anyway after checking back the previous street. I overbet the pot, putting 1500 in the middle. The under the gun player, who's going to have a ton of flush combinations, calls for less. The hijack appears to be a little upset as he lays his hand down. It's the moment of truth. I show my boat. It's no good. The opponent has ace 3 offsuit for a river full house. I guess that 3 of diamonds wasn't a complete blank after all. All of the air in my lungs has escaped with my profit on the day. I'm stuck 500 total, and I'm having flashbacks to the previous session of 1020 I played when I flopped the king high flush and lost a huge all-in pot to a backdoor full house. Pick up pocket 8s under the gun. I raise to 15, a player in middle position calls, the hijack calls, the cutoff calls, and the big blind calls as well. We're going more ways to the flop than I can count. I'm okay with it though because we flop a full house again. It comes king 8. After a month of running absurdly cold, it turns out all the strong hands that I wasn't making were waiting for me in Cambodia. Checks to me, with 4 opponents. I'm not going to slow play this. I bet 25, hoping that at least one player will have a king. The player in middle position might. He raises to 75. The hijack folds. The cutoff isn't afraid of a bet and a raise in front of him. He puts in a re-raise to 200. Someone must have gone into the settings and put poker on easy mode for us today. I appreciate it. The big blind folds. There's almost nothing I can do here that won't look extremely strong. I flat the 200, which I'm sure looks very suspicious. The player in middle position was just messing around with his raise. He folds. It's heads up with the cutoff, who only has 413 remaining. The turn is the 4 of spades. It could be good if the opponent somehow had a flush draw, but it's more than likely not good because the cutoff probably had trips and could be afraid that the flush draw just got there. I check. The cutoff is taking his time with his decision. Eventually, he makes up his mind. His mind tells him to jam. Bad decision. We snap call. The cutoff knows right away that he's going to need some help. I turn over the full house because I don't want to slow roll him. The cutoff keeps his cards face down.
Did you get there? Nice hand, nice hand, nice hand. Whoa. How much is it?
The cutoff hits a miracle river to boat over boat me, scoop the pot, and get a big double up. We played it the best we could. Sometimes the deck doesn't cooperate. I knew that I should have left when we were up 4,300. but that probably wouldn't have been a great look at a meetup game.